Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm author, leadership, and team development speaker, Joe Woodley, and this is another key moments for faith. Thank you guys so much for joining me on today's broadcast. An exciting show for you today. Before we go any further, make sure you click on the subscription box down at the bottom of the screen. Make sure you check out the things that are in the description. You're certainly sure to find something to help you on this journey we call faith. Make sure you share this video and other videos on this channel with your friends, your family, your neighbors, the guy down the street and around the corner, and even your enemies. And they may just happen to become your friends. As I said, I have a really exciting show to share with you guys today. You know, I was really encouraged as I was putting this show together. This morning, I was in the gym. Actually, as I was leaving the gym, I ran into an old boss slash supervisor of mine who was really encouraging to me. We were talking about various issues that were going on in our lives, and you know, he kept reminding me, say, "I'm old enough to be your dad now, Joe. I'm old enough to be your dad." And so we kind of laughed and chuckled about that and some other issues that are occurring in our society. And you know, he says to me, he says, you know, somebody's got to be willing to speak up. Somebody has to speak up. And I thought about that, you know, that this show is just so on point today. The topic of today's show is so on point with everything that's happening in our society, everything that's going on in the culture, everything that's going on in our communities, these mandates that are popping up all over the country and around the world. What does it mean for us as believers? This is going to go much deeper and much further than I think the average person is discerning enough to really understand or see. And a lot of people don't want to see it. They don't want to believe some of the things I'm about to tell you today, I'm about to share with you today, because we're just caught up in the pandemonium of what has occurred over the last year or so. Now, mind you, I'm not saying that COVID is not real. COVID is real. People have gotten sick. People have died, but we need to put some things in context because the pandemonium is real, the fear is real, the fear industry is in full effect, and it is really damaging our society and damaging our culture. You know, last week I spoke about free speech and the importance of maintaining free speech on my podcast and how free speech is being threatened. Well, we definitely saw that with COVID and everything that is going on. And I remember people saying they're going to do vaccine mandates. That's coming up. There's going to be vaccine passports. And I recall people saying that will never happen, not in this country. We are a democratic republic. And so there's no way that's going to happen. We're not under the rule of overlords who are dictating and controlling our lives. Well, guess what is happening, ladies and gentlemen? It's happening. And for those of you who chose to bury your heads in the sand, and many who continue to do so, I am going to challenge you to open your eyes, wake up from your slumber, and see what is going on around you. Observe the fact that your rights, your liberties are being stripped away minute by minute, day by day. You know, a lot of our rights were or have been being taken away for years now, decades, as a matter of fact. The federal government has been interfering in the average citizen's rights and in their liberties. But we have most certainly seen an acceleration of that over the past few years. And so we need to be prepared because we're moving down a line here where we're headed toward a place that if you don't choose to wake up, if you don't choose to stand up for yourself, if you don't choose to make your voice heard, you're going to wake up one day and you're not going to know what country you're living in. Let's start with our story. Our lead off story is we're talking about, I was actually inspired by this, by what's going on in New York at the moment. New York, my hometown, my place of birth. I lived there until I was 22 years old. And New York is a very different place than what it was when I was there. When I was small, New York was a complete unmitigated disaster. I can remember as a teenager walking the streets of New York. I remember in particular an incident where I was walking the streets of New York with an uncle of mine, and we were down in Times Square. And at that time, Times Square was a cesspool of depravity. There were prostitutes walking up and down the street, and in the door frames of buildings. This is not an exaggeration. This was there. It was wide open for everyone to see. This was what was going on. I remember one of them approaching me. I was about 12, 11 or 12 years old at the time. Probably 12, yeah, about 12 years old. And one of them approached me. My uncle grabbed me and was like, let's get on out of here. I mean, it was just absolute lunacy of what was going on. And the city changed and it was cleaned up, and some law and order was brought in. There were things that were good and things that were not so good. But one thing you could count on was you certainly that the likelihood of you getting mugged or robbed had greatly depreciated, and so I enjoyed going home to visit friends and family out on Long Island and going into the city and hanging out in the city. Well, now New York is back to being a cesspool of depravity, in part because of the leadership that is in place there. You may be wondering, I thought that this was a Christian channel, or what are you talking about these issues for? Well, the Bible makes it very clear that when leaders are corrupt, when there's corruption at the top, it affects the entire nation. And there's so much corruption that's taking place in this nation of ours right now that is affecting the people. The people are being oppressed, and many of them do not see it. And they don't see it because they're afraid. Many people are afraid, and fear will make people do things and agree to do things that they should not agree to allow to happen in their lives. So let's look at this story here in regards to the New York vaccine mandate, and that's exactly what it is. Even though the mayor of New York is not calling it a vaccine mandate, it is. What he's doing is he's found out, or these politicians know, that you cannot constitutionally mandate people take a vaccine. It's a violation of their civil rights. It's a violation of their human rights to tell you that you must take this vaccine. So what they're doing is they're going the backdoor route. And the backdoor route is, okay, we know we can't constitutionally mandate that every citizen in this country take the vaccine. So what we're going to do is we're going to deprive you of your rights over here in an attempt to force you to take the vaccine. Because they tried it with peer pressure, with this, particularly with this new Delta variant that has come out, where they were telling people, well, you know who it is. It's the people who have not vaccine. It's their fault. It's their fault. So they tried to peer pressure people into taking it, and that hasn't worked the way that they thought it was going to work. So the next step is we're going to now strip you of your personal freedoms in an attempt to force you to do this. So de Blasio said, this is the story. This is CNBC says New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio will mandate COVID vaccines for certain indoor activities. So I'm not going to tell you that you have to take the vaccine, but if you're going to go out and eat, if you're going to go into a restaurant, if you're going to enjoy any personal any privileges or participate in any activities, boy, doesn't this sound kind of familiar? The book of Revelation talks about not being able to buy or sell anything unless you take the mark. Now, I'm not saying that the COVID vaccine is the mark of the beast. What I am saying, it is preparation. It is preparing us for the coming of the mark of the beast. Joe, why would you say something like that? Because anytime the government interferes or intervenes and says that we are not going to allow you to make a living, we're not going to allow you to have access to even some of the basic necessities that you need to have in life, unless you abide by these particular rules that we're going to put in place. Mind you, now that the vaccine is still in the it's still in the experimental phase. Don't let the people in the media and the news deceive you into believing that this has been approved. It has not. It is still in the testing phase. That's why I said when people say, well, it's been approved by the FDA, is you have to be careful about the language. It's been approved for emergency use. They don't know the long-term effects of what this is going to do to people. I'm not telling you this to tell you to stop, to not take it, and I'm not telling you to go ahead and take it. You need to discuss that with your doctor, and you need to certainly be talking to the Lord about it. You really do. What I am saying is anyone who says that it's been approved for general use is not telling the truth. It's been approved for emergency use because they're thinking we need it now. We don't know what the long-term implications are. So forget about your personal rights, your personal liberties. You're going to do this whether you want to do it or not. And if you don't do it, we're going to exclude you from participating in daily activities and in getting or acquiring the things that you need to survive in your everyday life. So it says, will mandate, de Blasio is going to mandate COVID vaccines for certain indoor activities. And de Blasio said the mandate, known as the Key to New York City Pass, would encourage increased immunizations to combat the spread of the Delta coronavirus variant. My question now is, what then happens when the next variant comes along? Because, folks, here's the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. COVID is not going anywhere. There is going to be, or there are going to be, other variances of the COVID virus for years to come. The flu is a version of COVID. Did you guys know that? Oh, you probably didn't know that. The flu is a version of COVID. Is it as deadly? Maybe not. But it's a version of COVID. So it's going to be around. And so if we're going to govern or live our lives based on what could happen and continue to live in fear based on what could happen, then we're headed down a path of destruction for this nation, because we've been far too willing to negotiate away our civil liberties, particularly for those of us who are believers. So de Blasio is basically stripping these individuals. It goes on to say New York Mayor Bill de Blasio mandated inoculations for a range of indoor venues at a news conference, which I'm trying to figure out how he can do that because he's not a king. So he did this Tuesday morning, requiring proof of COVID vaccinations for employees and customers of indoor eateries, gyms, and entertainment centers. So you're going to get it. If you want to participate in general life, you're going to do this. Because if you don't do it, then I guess you're on your own. And we're going to shun you. We're going to put the scarlet letter on you. We're going to treat you as a leper in our society now if you don't do this. It talks about the orders going to go into effect August the 16th. Full enforcement will begin September the 13th. And it says it's going to combat the spread of the Delta coronavirus variant. He's acting like a king here. But we know that ultimately God is over every king in the earth. And so this type of junk is going on here. And we've seen a winnowing away of our civil rights, of our liberties as believers. All last year, all the churches were shut down. All the religious institutions were shut down. And I have some information here that you guys need to be aware of, because this is really important. We talk about the violation of our civil rights and our ability as believers to gather and to fellowship together. 1 in 5 churches right now faces permanent closure. 1 in 5 churches today faces permanent closure because of these restrictions that have been put in place, where people have not been allowed to assemble. They have not been allowed to worship together. They've not been allowed to pray together. They limit the size of the groups. 1 in 5 churches. Thousands of churches are going to be closed for good by the time we get to the end of the year. That's according to the Washington Examiner in a May article from this year. Thousands of churches are going to be closed for good by the end of this year. And they had another article. It says some churches will never reopen after COVID. Some are going to never reopen. Listen here, never reopen. These politicians have been waffling and wavering. You don't get a steady stream of consistent information. 1 minute, you get one story, the next, you get something else. Fauci lies, the government lies. Yes, I did. I know some of you are fans of Lord Fauci, but he lies, other individuals lie, and we see a steady weathering away of our rights and our liberties and our ability to function as believers in this society, even just people in general. The basic tenets of having the right to free speech start with being able to ask questions that start with who, what, when, where, why, and how. Who, what, when, where, why, and how. And last year, you were not allowed to ask who, what, when, where, why, and how if that did not fit in with the narrative that the mainstream media and many government officials were sharing with the people. You were not allowed to do that. If you dared say this virus came from a lab, you were shut down. Now everybody just about is saying it, except for, of course, for Fauci, because his hands are in all kinds of stuff. It's going to come out sooner or later just how involved he has been in all of this stuff. He's not as clean as the media has been trying to portray him. We're in a lot of trouble, folks. And Christians, if you don't dare to stand up, if you don't dare to speak out, if you don't dare to make your voices heard, you will wake up and you will find that your rights and your privileges as a believer have been taken away. Yes, in this nation. Yes, in the United States of America. You will wake up one day and you're going to find that that is the case. Why? Because many believers are too busy trying to make people feel good. They're too afraid to speak the truth. They're too afraid to stand up for what they believe in. They're too afraid to hold the line. They're too afraid to get canceled on social media because if I speak up, the social media company may cancel me. They may shut my account down. They may call me fake news. They may say that I'm not a reliable source. They're too afraid of those things. So this is where we are. Here's an article written from Town Hall. It's on townhall.com. And this is what amazes me. The fact of the matter is, almost everyone knows that the constitutional rights of the average American are being violated. Almost everyone knows that. It is so known, as a matter of fact, that even the Supreme Court of the United States of America acknowledged it. Here in this article, townhall.com, it was actually posted on July the 12th of this year. The article is by C.C. O'Leary. And the article, the title of it is SCOTUS, which is an acronym for Supreme Court of the United States, says violating the Constitution is fine if temporary. Listen to that. Violating the Constitution is fine if it's temporary. But we all know that these actions that they're taking are not temporary. This is not, these mandates are not temporary. These orders are not temporary. They continue to find new ways to violate your civil rights and your civil liberties and then blame you for the loss of those rights and those liberties. The article goes on, this particular article goes on to read, says, guess what's unconstitutional? When the federal government tells property owners they cannot be paid by tenants who rent their property. In September 2020, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention told state courts that they could not hear eviction proceedings and unilaterally declared that private property owners had to allow non-paying renters to live rent-free until the CDC said otherwise. Now, here's the problem. This is why this is unconstitutional for those of you who actually took some course in school where you went over the Constitution, because they really don't teach much about the Constitution anymore. They teach more about why you should hate the Constitution and why this country is so terrible. But the fact of the matter is we have three branches of government. The legislative branch, which includes the House of Representatives and the Senate, makes the laws. They write the laws. They create the laws. And by consensus, they implement those laws. The executive branch, which is the presidency and all of the offices that are underneath the presidential mantle, they enforce the laws. The Supreme Court of the United States is the one that interprets the laws. I want you to say that again. The legislative branch writes the laws. They create the laws. The executive branch enforces the laws, and the Supreme Court interprets the laws. They test those laws to make sure that they meet the validity test for being constitutional. The legislative branch may write laws, and if the laws are not constitutional, the Supreme Court goes and says the law is not constitutional. You need to go back to the drawing board. The president may enact a certain policy, and the Supreme Court looks at it and says, you know what, this policy is unconstitutional. You don't have the right, sir or madam, to enact this particular deed. So most people, because they don't know the Constitution, this stuff is going on, and they don't understand the system of checks and balances that we have in this country. They're allowing all of this stuff to take place because, you know, it's all in the name of doing what's in the best interest of the people. We are violating your rights to protect you. You know, it was something I posted online the other week, and I said, the mantra of the US government today is hand over your rights or surrender your rights so we can protect them. Surrender your rights so we can protect them. And ladies and gentlemen, the church is in a serious world of hurt right now, or many churches in this country are in a serious world of hurt because we have surrendered our rights because we figured that the federal government was going to protect them. But you are wrong. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And whenever you hand over your rights and your liberties to individuals who are in positions of power, do not be surprised when they abuse your rights. Do not be surprised when they decide that they want to take more of your rights. Look at what has happened in this nation over the last 20 years, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters. Look at what has happened in this country over the last 20 years. In 2001, we had 9/11, the tragic event where this country was struck in a horrific terrorist act. We introduced the Patriot Act. The Patriot Act is introduced, and the Patriot Act gave the government the right to legally spy on individuals who they deemed to be a threat. We now have documentation years later to prove that the federal government has overstepped their bounds. The FBI and the CIA have overstepped their bounds in pursuit of individuals that they deem to be threats to the United States of America. And this includes US citizens. Every president since then, every president since George W. Bush has expanded on the Patriot Act. Each and every president, without exception. Now that President Biden is in office, he's now using the same Patriot Act, the same legislation, the same rules that were put in place, the same thing that stripped individuals of their right. He's looking to enhance that, and now they are identifying individuals in his country as a threat. They now say that the largest, biggest threat to the United States citizens are fellow citizens. The person that's living next door to you, the person you go to church with, the person who may not agree with what the system is feeding them. They're now the biggest threat. The person who does not buy into the narrative that the federal government is spitting out. If you don't regurgitate verbatim what the federal government wants you to believe, they deem you to be a threat and they want to shut you down. And so now we're in a situation, ladies and gentlemen, where the federal government, state and local governments are violating your civil liberties. And yet, and still, we go silent. We don't speak up and demand that we have our constitutional rights. This is not a question. This is not a wish list. This is not a hope for. You have the right to certain rights in the United States of America as a citizen. In church, you need to wake up and realize that those rights are being weathered away, that they are stripping those rights away from you piece by piece. You don't have the right to gather. Still at certain locations in this country, they don't want you to gather beyond a certain number. If you gather, you need to wear a mask. You complied with that. They let you put a mask on, but you can't have but a certain number of people in the building. You complied with that. Now it's, well, you can't gather unless you take the shot. You see how the goalpost keeps moving. Once you take the shot, well, you can't gather until you take the next shot. Well, you can't gather if you're not regurgitating the narrative of the federal government. You can't gather if you don't agree with what the powers that be are saying. We're going to shut you down. We're going to block you from social media. This is a very real thing. An article here from the New York Post, which is published July the 8th, 2021. And the article is entitled, "Don't Buy into the Hysteria. The Delta variant is actually less dangerous." Hear me. Don't buy into the hysteria. The Delta variant is actually less dangerous. You don't hear a lot of that in the news, do you? All you hear are the numbers of people who have gotten the Delta variant, whether they have been vaccinated or unvaccinated. And mind you, there are individuals, many individuals who have been vaccinated who are still getting the new variant. But according to science, and it's funny how we love to follow science until the science disagrees with what our particular point of view is, because that's a going theme that I hear around much of the media and social media is believe the science. I believe the science, and people want to believe the science until the information disagrees with what they've been spouting. Oh, this is the worst thing. This is the worst pandemic in the history of mankind. Well, boy, that's a lot of hyperbole there. Far from it. What about the bubonic plague? Killed millions of people. The Spanish flu back in 1918. Millions of people. Far deadlier. than what we have faced with this. And yet and still, we have treated this like this is the worst thing to ever happen to humanity. And we have willingly given up our constitutional rights for the feeling of safety. Not that it makes us safer, but the feeling of safety is we're led much more by our emotions than we are the science. Yeah, we say the science, but really we're talking about our emotions. This does not discount the fact that many people have died. Many people have fallen ill. But when you look at the percentages, the numbers just don't bear out. If you look at the percentages, the numbers do not bear out, not for what they're doing. Not for what they're doing. Less than 1% of individuals who got COVID died. Less than 1%, and we shut the world down. The Delta variant of this particular virus, same thing. Less than 1%. As a matter of fact, it's more contagious, but it's less potent. And we're shutting the country down. And many believers are leading the charge in shutting things down because we are not walking by faith. That doesn't mean that you have to be ignorant and act ignorantly. I believe you need to take whatever precautions you need to take. But most of all, the number one precaution is you need to go before the Lord and you need to trust God. But all that stuff's been thrown out of the window. All of it's been tossed out of the window. So this article here from the New York Post, again, it was posted by the Post editorial board. And it says, don't believe the hysteria. The Delta variant is actually less dangerous. On Wednesday, the Delta variant became America's dominant COVID strain. Yet it's no cause for panic. I want to say this again. It's no cause for panic. Yet it's no cause for panic. Do I need to say that again? The numbers, especially in Britain, which Delta hit hard, show it's far fewer hospitalizations and deaths, while vaccines remain highly effective against it in those particular areas. And even the United States of America, far fewer hospitalizations. These statistical data that they thought is being twisted. Well, we saw a 300% increase in people with the Delta variant. How many of those individuals actually died? Why don't they report that? You're not going to. It says most media hype the fear that Americans should be more concerned about the Delta variant. They're hyping this thing up because media knows how to control you. They are masters of manipulation. The media are masters of manipulation. Now, I heard something the other day that really resonated with me. I want to share with you guys this really short thought before I read a little bit further in this article. And I heard someone say, we live in a herd-driven society. We live in a herd-driven society. It was such a profound statement. What did he mean by we live in a herd-driven society? Well, we have more access to information today than ever before. You can open your phone, look on your laptop, go to the library. You have more access to information than ever before. But people are thinking less than ever before. People are not taught to think. Our schools teach people to be drones, buy into the narrative, follow the narrative, don't question what you're being told. So more access, and we don't think as much as we used to. And whatever direction the herd goes, we willfully follow. So if everybody goes and jumps off the cliff, we're going to jump right along with them. Because again, more access to information, but we don't think for ourselves anywhere near as much. So on Wednesday, the Delta variant became America's dominant COVID strain, as I said before. Yet it's no cause for panic. No cause for panic. I said that about 4 times. No cause for panic. Most media hype the fear. Why? They want ratings. They want money. They could care less about your health. I hate to say that. But it's the truth. The media is in it for the money. They're in it for the money. The old song, what was the song back in the 90s? P. Diddy and Mace, all about the Benjamins. No, that was actually Biggie Smalls. It's all about the Benjamins, baby. It's all about the Benjamins. That's what it's about. All the stuff that you're being fed is all about the Benjamins. So scientists have good reasons to sound the alarm. New York Magazine insists it's hard to understand how worried to be. It's hard to understand how worried to be. The CNN and that analyst claims. So they're pumping this stuff up. They're driving this. They're driving this narrative. The media is driving this narrative, and they're working in conjunction with the federal government. And again, many of us who profess to be believers, we're right along with it. We're not asking any questions whatsoever. We're not praying. We're just watching the news. So the news says put 3 masks on, we're going to put 3 masks on. If the news says, hey, all of this stuff has been approved already, well, it must be approved already. We don't ask any questions of these individuals who are in positions of authority. We honor people who are in positions of authority. We respect them. But there is nothing wrong with asking questions. And this country has a history of lying to people. There are many things this country has done. This is not an anti-American speech. I love the United States of America. I'm grateful to be born in the United States of America. There are many countries around the world where people do not enjoy the rights and the liberties that we get to enjoy. But it is also foolish to ignore the flaws and the mistakes that we have made. Because I love this country, I want to see it do better. I want to see it meet the full potential, meet its fullest potential. And so I'm going to ask questions when statements are made. But many of us are not asking questions. We're just going along for the ride. And meanwhile, and in the meantime, we are losing our rights and our liberties. We're losing them. We're buying into the media's narrative of fear and gloom, death and destruction. We've bought into it, and we're trapped, and we're in a spiral effect. And everything that comes out in the media, every new piece of news that comes out, we jump all over it, and we run, and we bury ourselves in our backyards. We hide in our houses. We lock ourselves in our attics rather than getting on our knees and going before the Lord and saying, God, what do you want me to do? What is the message that you're trying to deliver to the church and through the church at this time? I say that again. What is the message that you're trying to deliver to the church and through the church at this time? And many of us, unfortunately, are failing the test. Instead of delivering the message that God is giving to the church, we are hiding just like everyone else. We're not sharing the gospel. We're not reaching out to our fellow man. We're too afraid to do it. I remember last year I was in a meeting and I was so frustrated after this meeting. I couldn't believe it. I was so frustrated by some of the things that were being said. Now, mind you, I do believe we should be wise. You go by the leading of the Holy Spirit. But I remember having a conversation with a group of individuals, and we were talking about reaching out to people. So that the church cannot stop reaching out to people. It is our call here in the earth. We must reach people with the gospel. We must help them to meet their needs. That's our responsibility as believers. We don't leave people high and dry and go and hide somewhere in a closet because the world around us appears to be falling apart. In the darkest of times, in the darkest of days, this is our moment to shine the brightest. And in this meeting, there were so many people on there who would say, well, I don't know about that. I don't know about that. I don't think I want to hand out food. I don't think I want to pray or go around and pray for people. So I'm not even asking you to lay hands on people. Stand at a distance. You feel like that's going to make you more comfortable, whatever. Fine. But we need to be involved. We need to be active. We need to be engaged. That's our responsibility as believers. No, I'm not comfortable with that. And we surrendered our rights. We surrendered our privileges. And look at where we are now. We have emboldened these politicians to go just another step further. And they've been emboldened to go another step further beyond that. And another step, and another step. Because we've emboldened them, because we took our foot off the gas. We took our eyes off the Lord, and we bought into the narratives, the common narrative, the group think that has been going on. As our rights have been weathered by this storm. I'm not the only one who's saying our constitutional rights have been violated. The Supreme Court of the United States has. There are those of us who are believers who would say, well, you know what? You knew this was going to happen. I mean, it's in the Bible. It's in the Bible. This is going to happen. I mean, believers, our rights are going to be taken away, and there's going to come a time we're going to have to take the mark of, but a lot of people are going to be forced to take the mark of the beast, and a lot of people are going to take it willingly. That day is going to come. So there's nothing we can do about it. We might as well just hang on for the ride, and we just wait till our change, wait for Jesus to come. But I refuse to accept that narrative. Excuse me, my fellow brothers and sisters, but there are still people in this world who don't know the Lord. Excuse me, my fellow brothers and sisters. There are still people in this world that need to know Jesus. There are still people that need to see signs, wonders, and miracles. Excuse me, my brothers and sisters, but people still need to know the goodness of the Lord. And they're not going to know the goodness of the Lord while you're hiding in your closet. They're not going to know the goodness of the Lord while you're shutting yourself in. You got to get out, and you got to get engaged. I hope that you guys got something out of this today. Believers, you need to stand up, and you need to fight, or you won't have any rights. God bless each and every one of you.